While the year 2020 has boasted some unwelcome changes, certain welcome changes like the NEP, which strives to ingrain quality, innovation, and holisticness in the education system, will revolutionize our current education system. While the private education sector has largely enjoyed these changes, a large portion of our government schools have entirely missed out. Due to limited resources, poorly trained teachers, and unfavorable infrastructure, our government school children have been dealt the short end of the stick. If the COVID pandemic is any indication, these children have suffered a complete halt to learning due to the inequitable access of digital devices. There thus emerges a serious need to relook at how CSR can come together to improve the education reality in these schools. So join me in this panel discussion on improving education delivery and outcomes in government schools. To moderate this panel, I would like to invite Ms. Kavita Anand, Executive Director and co-founder at Adhyayan Quality Education Services. Ms. Anand is the founder of both Adhyayan Quality Education Services and Adhyayan Foundation. She was awarded the Ashoka Fellowship in 2015 for social entrepreneurship and single-minded focus on bringing quality to schools through leadership and development. Over her career spanning 30 years, she's worked in organizations such as Aga Khan Education Services and the Sir Ratan Tata Trust. Thank you for moderating this panel for us, ma'am. Our first speaker this evening is Mr. Raju Sharma, Director CSR at Interglobe Aviation Limited. Mr. Sharma leads the social initiatives of the company in areas of children and education, women empowerment, environment, and heritage. An alumnus of Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, he completed his master's in 1999 and since then has been working in the development sector with NGOs, INGOs, government, and corporates ranging from grassroots implementation programs to strategy and planning. Lovely to be hosting you, Mr. Sharma. Up next, we have Mr. Sharvani Rai, Assistant Vice President, Strategy Communication at Genpact. Ms. Rai leads strategy engagement and communications for the global CSR and diversity and inclusion teams at Genpact. She designs and executes programs that harness the energy and talent of employees for the economic, social, and environmental betterment of the communities that we live and work in. For diversity, equity, and inclusion, she works closely with the leadership team to create an ecosystem of inclusion and promoting an environment wherein women excel and advance. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. Our third speaker this evening is Mr. Anil Sharma, Head Corporate Communications, CSR and Sustainability at Havells India. Mr. Sharma is a high-energy marketing and communication professional with over 22 years of experience in developing and executing highly effective and result-oriented plans. He is a strategic leader with demonstrated success in recognizing and maximizing individual, agency, and cross-functional team strengths. He has worked at the globally reputed PR agencies and leading corporates. He has also conceptualized the 360-degree approach to CSR and the concept of sustainable CSR at Havells India. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Sharma. Our fourth speaker for this panel is Mr. Bajrang Bagra, President at Ekal Abhiyan. Mr. Bagra is a chartered accountant and has a cherished career of corporate manager from middle to board level for 36 years in various fields of economy, ranging from power, seeds, mining, metal, railways, and consultancy. Mr. Bagra has been active with CII as the Orissa member of the Development Council for Affirmative Action and the member of the National Committee on CSR and Sustainable Development. After leaving the corporate career prematurely, he has been pursuing community service since 2013 and acts as president of Ekal Abhiyan in empowering tribal and rural communities through primary education. Lovely to be hosting you, sir. Our final speaker for this panel is Ms. Garima Babbar, Head Education Initiatives for Adobe South Asia at Adobe. Ms. Babbar has a rich experience of 20 years in this field and works with the government and think tanks. She leads the India flagship initiative, Adobe Digital Disha, to build digital creativity skills of students across K-12 and higher education. She's passionate about education and works extensively on policies and programs to help develop new age skills of students in latest technologies. I would once again like to remind all our panelists that this session runs till 5:30 p.m. Please reserve some time towards the end for some Q&A with our audience. Over to you, Ms. Anand.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I think as an educator, with too many years of experience. I'm obviously clearly passionate about education. So I'm going to take this opportunity to invite all of you to be able to sort of make a statement about what excites you and what you see as the biggest challenges, because we're looking at here state government delivery. We're not looking at affordable private schooling necessarily, or looking at private schooling of any other kind. We're looking specifically at state-led schooling and looking at it from different angles and different perspectives. What it brings, what it does not, what do you see as the key challenge of the primary section as well as the secondary section, both fairly different and both showing up in the national education policy now in a very interesting and dynamically different way. So, I mean, I'd like Garima, if you could make your opening statement there, and I'd just like to go through everyone to say, well, how do we see the challenge? What's the big problem in front of us? Yeah.
Thank you, Kavita, and thank you, team CSR Box, for inviting me on this platform. It's always a pleasure. I know I have limited time, Kavita, and I'm going to stick to it. So I think one of the key challenges is infrastructure. I know there will be questions on further, how do we go about, mitigate? We are all aware of it, but how do we work collaboratively towards it so that students have the right kind of infrastructure to impact learning outcome? For me, one of the biggest things that I focus on as a part of Adobe Digital Disha program, how do we instill creativity, communication, and collaboration among students? And I'm going to talk about it in subsequent questions from you.
Great. Okay, great. So Mr. Bajrang Bagra, would you like to go next? You're on mute. No, I can
Areas of optical Vidyalayas are in a remote rural and tribal areas only. That is where we have exposure to the government school functioning as well in those areas. So, I will stick to the rural area. It covers almost 70% population of India. We see the duration of school hours and the primary and secondary school teachers. And that's for real schooling in the presence of teacher drove down even to 20 to 30%. That's the big challenge as we see.
Okay, great. So Anil, would you like to go next?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for having me on the panel. I think the biggest, I would agree with Garima that infrastructure is one of the key issues that these schools are actually facing. Apart from that, I also think that the entire focus, we lack the focus. Whether it's the bureaucracy, whether it's the political or whatever. But end of the day, what is that a child requires? What is that we are trying to give them? I think there is a huge difference in that. And what is the reality? I think we are too far away from the reality, and we're just doing things for the sake of doing it. I think that's where we need to probably kind of, come to a halt and rethink and see that, if these kids are going to be the future of the nation, then are they really getting what they ideally should be getting?
I mean, would you like to elaborate a little bit on what do you think they should be getting, which they aren't?
Okay, so it is, from the most basic, basic infrastructure, whether it is, like a water in the school, or it is like a toilet in the school, from the school books to the uniform to, multiple other things, like a pencil, sharpener, or whatever that is required. Then the quality of the teachers, right? What will they really learn? If you go to a 8th class student or a 10th class student, are they really, competitive, enough with the, today, let's say a Delhi school, or maybe in a Alwar state, right? A Rajasthan, city school. No, they will not be. And then there are key issues like, so the quality of education, the kind of books that we are giving, half of the children do not even have books. while the government says that we do give them, but on a practical ground, a lot of kids do not even have school books. You can't fail them, but end of the day they don't really overscore, or they don't score really as compared to a lot of other students. Now this is, I've seen this practically happening.
Okay, so okay, thanks, Sharbani. Would you like to go next, and then we'll go to Raju?
Sure. Thank you, Kavita. I think the challenges that I would like to talk about is that the system was already struggling, and now the schools might be closed till end of August next year. So that's almost a year of lost education. And we've made do. We've put in interventions, but we are sure that we don't know where we are going with this. So how do we bring our children back up to grade level literacy? How do we continue on a virtual environment in case that need arises? And also, if we are thinking of opening up, as in when we think of opening up, how do we bring them back, ensuring that the norms are followed, the sanitization, etc., is done, and they come back to a safe environment where they can start and continue to learn. So these are some of the challenges that come to our mind, and some of it is getting addressed through a special program that Genpact runs, which is called the School-Centered Community Development.
Okay, so we'll hear more about that, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Later. Raju, would you like to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. After hearing all my colleagues, all my panel members here, so I would like to just make a statement that what is one thing that we in Indigo are trying to do? What is the one challenge that all of us are trying to address through our CSR program? One thing which we always say, and which we try to make an effort, is impact the quality inside the classroom, which Anil Sharma, Garima, and everyone seems to be saying. So all our energies, all our programs actually are focused around quality intervention. So we predominantly, all our CSR programs are focused around the government school systems. So when we say that, what do we mean by quality inside the classrooms? So we are talking about, so how do we impact the quality? We are talking about three means of impacting quality. One is the intervention around the academic inputs. So how do you engage with the teachers? How do you engage with the government school teachers? All of that part of it is one basket of our intervention. Second basket of work is around digital learning and digital learning and IT-based learning, smart classes, and all of that. And third, which Anil Sharma ji and also Garima talked about, is the infrastructure around the government school system. So we believe that if we are able to address these three pillars of education, we can make a major dent around the big problem of education. The problems are humongous. There are many kinds of problems. There are different kinds of issues and all. But we believe that if you have to impact quality, you need to address the issues of academic orientation. You need to work around digital. You need to work around the infrastructure part. And infrastructure will also have several components to it. Each of them have different components. But broadly, if I may, put, that's what we are trying to address. That's the challenge. And one particular thing that Anil, my colleague Anil here, very pertinently pointed out is, how do we keep the child at the center of our intervention? Are we intervening for the heck of intervening, or are we keeping the child in the center of our intervention? Are we looking at the physically challenged child? Are we looking at the girl child? Are we looking at child from different class group and caste group sitting together? Are we talking about changing the mindset of everybody involved around education? These are the very critical components of it. And lastly, I think one of the challenges for all CSR programs, for all our program interventions, is the sustainability of processes and not the programs, maybe. So these are some of the highlights, and these are some of the thought points which I want to leave my discussion at this point of time. But lastly, I think challenge is there. We are in a huge problematic zone now today, but I think there is a lot of enthusiasm for people to come out. And this is the right time for partnerships, for corporates to come with each other, for corporates and civil society and the government to come with each other. At the moment, I rest my case.
Well, you can, although I think I'm going to start with you again, because the big question that I have here, you've mentioned two things, systems, and then you mentioned processes, and then you've sort of talked about three different pillars. So I'm really curious and interested in knowing what exactly you mean by systems and processes, and how does that become something that you identify, and what's the challenge in that? Really?
Yeah, so you know what, whenever you talk about education, I think whenever we start any education intervention, particularly from the civil society, particularly from the corporate part of it, personally, as a professional in this field, I think we need to build in the sustainability process during the planning stage itself. You know, when we say sustainability process, I'm giving an example. I'm giving an example. For example, we are trying to investing on building the infrastructure. We are trying to work on the teacher education program. We need simultaneously also work with the school committee, parent teachers, so that some resources, when we are no longer there after 5 years or 10 years, their capacity is enhanced so that they are able to resource mobilize, able to demand their rights also from the government, from the district authorities, from the local philanthropists, that you come and also look after the school. So Indigo or Havels or Garima or Sherbani cannot be there, or even Bajrang Bhai or even you, Kavita, cannot be there in perpetuity in a field. Therefore, we have to build up our processes in the field in such a manner that the community, the school management committee, the panchayats, the block officials, they take the onus and pick up the processes themselves. Programs may not sustain, but the processes need to sustain. That's what therefore we need to work extensively with the groups and people. That's where our entire focus is always when we work in education.
So as the other CSR focus person on education, does GenPact have a similar approach, Sherbani, or is it very different?
No, I am very glad that this topic came up, because if you look at GenPact, we do have specific programs which are working with the communities in the government schools, and I completely agree with Mr. Raju when he said that sustainability is very important, because we as partners can only continue for a certain period of time, but the overall intent is that the community thereafter picks it up to ensure that the changes stick and the improvement continues to happen. I'll just take a minute to talk about our program, which is a first of a kind program. It's called GenPact School Centered Community Development Program. It is a partnership between corporates, leading not-for-profits, and community members, which looks at a holistic development of children in communities across India. So we are partnering with more than 15 nonprofits in 18 schools across 4 locations. And the program currently is impacting the lives of more than 9,700 children. The numbers may not be much, but the work that we're doing is very, very deep impact. So the program actually focuses on children in preschools. Then it looks at children who are in the school groups, which are young individuals. And then we also have youth resource centers. And all of it is basically strengthening the capacity of the school administration, the management committee, and the community programs then are done through training and other resources. So about the interventions that we do, we have the NEEV program, which is the Anganwadis for preschoolers who are within the age group of say 0 to 6 years. Then the school support plan, which is the school intervention for children within 6 to 14 years age group. And then Karwa, which is the youth resource center for targeting children who are between the age of 14 to 25 years. And there are multiple, mini programs which are stacked according to these age groups. And then we are working with the schools, we are working with the school management, we are working with the parents all together to say that if a child is to continue with his or her education today, the ecosystem is ready for the child so that the child actually has the right impetus, the right encouragement to grow and then find his or her feet in today's society. So that's what the program is all about.
So what do you expect to see after you've quit from there and then, 10 years later you go back? What do you think should be there for you to know that you have strengthened the systems?
Yes, so one part of it, Kavita, is that, every program that we do, we are very clear on, we have a strong monitoring evaluation process, etc., which looks at data, which looks at social return on investment. And we have big partner, we have strong partners like a KPMG or a Goodera who helps us understand, how the processes are working. And we actually break it out into mini pieces. So one part of this is the data visualization and the impact analysis piece. But the bigger part of it is how the schools are doing. So are we actually enabling the school administration to carry forward with the changes? If we look, and there are times when we really step back and then we see how are they continuing with it. And it's been encouraging so far. Similarly, one good thing is to see the engagement of the parents. And, there are times when the parents actually turn out to be a spokesperson, convincing the other parents to say that what is happening is good, so your child should go to school, or if there is a problem, they are kind of, and really encouraging to see. So like all social impact projects, I think everything takes a lot of time, but even with the slightest bit of encouragement that you see, it kind of gives you a very big hope that we are
place.
And I will share our experience from the Ekal Vidyalaya. We do run primary level schools in more than 100,000 villages free of cost, because it is a voluntary based model. And our models speaks as if after 5 years of hand holding, when we withdraw, it should be self-sustained, both in the managerial capacity as well as the funding capacity by the local community of the villagers. And this is what we call our Swavlamban Yojana. The training, retraining, refresher courses for the teachers, etc., that continues. That kind of support we continue. But as far as other managerial and the financial sustainability, we ensure that within 5 years, the villagers or within a cluster of 30 villages, because each village community may not be able to support its own school, but at least through the cross subsidization from the nearby village, etc., as a unit of 30 villages, all the 30 schools in these villages are self-sustained. It works in some areas, doesn't work in many others, particularly in the remote tribal areas, because they do have issues of the resources which they can spare for this, or the will to spare for this, because the education still is not getting the due priority in the remote dwellers in their family budget, etc. So it works both ways. If we emphasize too much on the Swavlamban and the self-sustainability, then the schools face the risk of the closure. But otherwise, in other areas, it works very well. And the model has been found to be very sustainable.
Thank you. I think in your case, you had to create that system, whereas the government already has a system. It has something that's functioning and in place. So I'd like to ask, Garima and Anil to sort of talk about more about how do they see good practice and what do they think money should go towards and why? So Garima first.
So I'm going to take a step back, Kavita, and something that I'm extremely proud of. This was a very big announcement that all of us witnessed. Ranjit Desale, who won the global, prize, Global Teacher Award, and he happens to be an Adobe creative educator. And he started his journey with Adobe about a year back. And, during COVID, I just happened to talk to him before he got the prize, and he told me that he was already teaching a lot of students, a lot of teachers. But yes, he was disheartened because of salaries not being there or not the right infrastructure. But still, look at the enthusiasm of the teachers. And today, we are all proud of him, and instead of taking the entire prize money, he decided to donate back 50% of it with his fellow winners. So I think that's the level of compassion. That's the level of I would say, enthusiasm that we have in our Indian teachers. We must focus on how we can train them, how we can build their capacity. So something, that we recently started, I know that we've been doing education, and that's our mission mode project for us in India from a technology standpoint. We give out our software, which is Adobe Spark, absolutely free. And then we build capacity of teachers, how they can integrate that as a part of pedagogy, and how students can enhance their creativity, communication, collaboration, and critical thinking skills. But yes, before we do that, it's important to build capacity of the teachers. And for that, we have a program called Adobe Creative Educator, where all the teachers, they can go online. This course is on Adobe Education Exchange, absolutely free of cost. There are plenty of other resources where Adobe has invested. And I strongly urge all the teachers who are hearing us today, please leverage all the resources which are available, use them in your classrooms. So that's one part. So where corporates like us are heavily investing in education because we believe in it. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. What is that we are doing to make it more sustainable, integrated? Otherwise, at the end of the day, there'll be multiple programs, but again, no outcome. We will again be here after 5 years talking about the same challenges. But yes, what is the solution towards it? I think from my understanding and based on the experience that I've had in the last couple of years of working with various government schools, the only solution is we have to build capacity of the teachers. And at the same time, encourage the teachers to use what are the best practices of other teachers so that no student is left behind. So that's my suggestion.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to come back to you on a couple of things, but Anil, first you.
Yeah. So basically, I think, I'll first give you a narration of what we do. And then, within that, how sustainability plays an important and integral role. So we started our CSR journey almost 16, 17 years back with a midday meal. Today, after Akshaya Patra, we are the largest midday meal provider in this country, minus the government of India. Why midday meal? Because that was the only way we could get children to the school. So education comes second, hunger comes first, right? So we started with that, and today we feed about 60,000 children across 693 schools in Alwar district of Rajasthan. Starting from there, we realized that, if you have to kind of, get them to have interest in the education, you will have to give them some basic infrastructure, because government schools, and especially in the rural areas, do not have that basic as well. So we started building some rooms. We realized after rooms, toilets, then also of the toilets, how sustainability will have. So we went for bio toilets, right? So you don't need any maintenance. Now, to ensure that the toilets are working after 5 years also of building them, you have to have some kind of, inspections infrastructure. So we did technology on that. Our midday meals are going, vans are going, they're inspecting the toilets, making sure. And we have, with the state government, we have announced a huge prize for the best and most clean toilets. So schools are now competing. We're giving them assistance in kind of, making sure that the toilets are clean. So we're giving financial assistance as being there. With the girl child on the sanitation part, giving them sanitary napkins, and reusable sanitary napkins. So basically taking the hygiene, then giving them basic school benches, desks, all of that, so that they don't have to kind of, read and write on the floor. So, and then build that. Once they move out of the school, we give kind of, give them skill training, electrical skill training and multiple others. And then probably an opportunity to get employed with Havells India itself. Right. So this is how, we are doing and ensuring that, on all of these parts. Now on midday meal front, there is no sustainability. The day we stop, food will stop unless somebody else comes in, but community is not going to take it. Right. But on the sanitation part, the children are being, so from 9th to 12th, children are being now designated as to, they can now teach their, younger ones as to how to ensure that the toilets are clean and all of those things. So they are becoming because we realize that parents will not come to the school. School management committee has certain role to play, but they really no one is bothered about it. And how these children could be the torchbearers of this entire thing. Similarly, if we stop infrastructure building, nobody else will come unless a corporate comes. But what we have now realized is that the school principals, in most cases, they have become entrepreneurs. Now they are not waiting for the government funds. They are approaching corporates like us and saying that, give us, some money so that we can build this part of the school, and this is where we are kind of, feeling happy that, okay, fine, now they're moving out and we are assisting them. So everything we may not be able to take on our own, but to ensure that, corporates are now coming together. Like, we have been approaching Reckitt Benckiser that, can they give us, these, materials for cleaning of toilets. Similarly, let's say, some other, organization we could approach and say that, okay, fine, how can we, come together to provide the education to children, the tech education to the children, right? Because otherwise the technology, while it may be there, government has imposed that, but nobody is using them. Half of the time light is not there. So those kind of issues are there. So we need to mitigate these challenges by coming together, but ensuring that sustainability of these is there in the long term.
Right. So when
That's
you say
from my side right now.
sustainability, give me one line on what do you mean by that? What is sustainable?
Okay, so let's say I talked about bio toilets. In most cases, if you build a toilet 2-3 years down the line, it is defunct because there is nobody to clean it. Nobody takes care of it. Today, after 6 years of building, we started in 2013. Today, with 7 years of building, there is not a single toilet. 5,000 bio toilets have been built. Not a single one is defunct. So I'm assuming now, after 5 years, it will not get defunct because 7 years is a long period, right? So that's the sustainability. The entrepreneurship of these school principals is sustainable because irrespective which school they will move, they will bring and draw funds from different organizations.
Right. So a lot of what has happened during COVID is that schools, because of the fact that they've been closed, we are looking at issues of leadership, of resilience, of how do schools manage when there's no technology, people trying to run schools on WhatsApp or trying to do distance learning through different materials. So there's a huge disruption that's happened, and I think I'd like to hear, Raju, you said that this is all about systems and building. So what is it that you see as being sustainable in terms of what has the learning been from COVID? Where should that sort of change in education be sustained after children have come back to school, even when that has reopened? Is there something that needs to stay from whatever we've learned?
Are you guys there? Yeah. So as I said, COVID situation has really, really challenged all of us. I mean, it is an unprecedented time, and fortunately, what has happened from Indigo's point of view, even prior to COVID, we had invested on the digital learning part of it. We had kind of invested in our smart buses, and these buses were equipped with computers and digital boards. And these buses actually moves from school to school, giving children an opportunity to first learn computer and also giving opportunity to the teachers to teach complex lessons in the most smartest way possible. So there was an opportunity of government school teachers, government school students who get acquainted with digital learning even before the COVID came, at least in the last 2-3 years time. The bus used to move in the communities in the evening, giving the youth in the villages an opportunity to learn computer and use it as an internet kiosk. So there was this preparedness even before the COVID. So now during COVID, Indigo, along with partner organizations, leveraged the opportunity because the schools were non-functioning, schools were closed, and there was a huge challenge and all. Even the effective partnership between the NGOs and the government school teachers and the communities helped us to reach the students. A recent ASAR report, tells us that there has been a spurt of people buying smartphones in the countryside in the last 3-4 months. So coupled with that, that buying of those smartphones, coupled with our own preparedness with the technology, we were able to reach out to children. We were able to reach out to communities as to how they can also use the WhatsApp. I mean, the smartphone being available First of all, the smartphone unavailable was one challenge. That when people overcame, another challenge was usage of the smartphone. Okay, that is something which we had to overcome. Third was, even if they knew how to use the smartphone, where is the lesson? Where is the learning that's happening in the smartphone? So in these way, we kind of, our digital classes kind of help children, help us to reach out to these villages, to these communities, through their smartphone. We were, in a way, I mean, even before the COVID come, we were somewhere, but we used this opportunity to kind of leverage the learning. So that's something which we understood. And just one statement that I would like to make. And now this will sustain. Now when the communities have learned to use the WhatsApp and the smart classes, there is a process that is started along with the government school teachers that is going to sustain. Because one thing that I think everybody is appreciate here is that when we say working with the government, it does not mean one uniform thing. It means different thing. Government is a monolithic structure. We need to improvise. We need to understand what component are we working with. Are we working with the teacher component part of it? Even teacher component will have multiple layers to it. How do we plan for that intervention? Like for example, we also consider the headmasters as the CEOs of the school. Let's position the headmaster as CEO of the organization. Let's position the para teachers as a different teacher. Let's position the teacher as a different kind of challenge. So, government is a monolithic structure. We need to understand what is it that we are interfacing and simultaneously work on the strategy and the planning and the sustainability part of it as we go on.
You're right. So I guess that this brings us to the whole question of, what's the capacity building of institutions to do with the delivery of education? Because government, like you said, it's got multiple people contributing to. I mean, while one part of the government looks at, say, recruitment, another part looks at professional development, a third part looks at what's the material resources required, and a fourth. So it's not as if it's one person that you're talking to or one person you're dealing with. It's actually, and sometimes it's across different ministries, because sports is looked after by the sports ministry, the IT ministry looks after the tech and the culture. So there's a lot of different people, the tribal affairs and the women and child development. So how does one, as a CSR, how do you begin to look at this? This variety, and who do we kind of really talk to, who are we relating with? And also the bigger question to do with that is, how do you build the capacity of those people if you're looking at system change? So both things. Who do we talk to and how do we help? Yeah.
I'll just make a quick small statement here. Therefore, organizations like CSR Box and all of us here, the interface that we are having here, the discussion that we are having here is very, very important, because this is the time for partnerships and hand holding together. I cannot work in isolation. Bajrang Bhai, Anil, Sarbani, Garima, Kavita, all of us and all the civil society goes together now and handhold together so that we learn from each other and leverage the lessons, because we have to work with the government school teachers. We have to work with the government system, and each one cannot be, it cannot do everything on their own. Therefore, this is very, very critical that we join hands. I mean, that's my statement that I want to make.
I'm opening this to all the people on the panel, really. I mean, anybody who'd like to.
I'd like to add, I was waiting for you to, Kavita, open this to all. Sure. Thanks to COVID, I think we've seen digital, acceleration in every sphere, and education, of course, takes the lead, because we definitely don't want students to lag with their studies. So yes, teachers and government have taken a lot of efforts in using digital as one of the platforms, maybe WhatsApp, Doordarshan, or any of the forms, that they want to leverage. But yes, I've even come across reports where the block officers are also delivering syllabus, a lot of, books to the houses of various students. So that's really commendable. Now comes, the new education policy. If you look at it, there is so much of emphasis on digital. I've never seen that in the last 20 years of my career, which is great. And therefore, all the more reasons that we need to join hands and really support government in implementation, because 2022 is the time when they have to implement. we have to showcase a lot of pilots. We have to do a lot of proof of concepts. But something that I'm really excited about is the Diksha platform that's come up, which will be one-stop shop for all the curriculum and all the trainings and everything, so that we are able to actually, instead of having different material at different levels and different organizations like Adobe, Genpact, Interglobe, or probably Microsoft, Google coming together, it's like one-stop shop for all the content that would be available, and that too in different languages. Technology will definitely be one of the enablers in learning. And one of the things, I'm going back to the program because, that's something that I'm extremely passionate about, that we always do, and something that we experimented with Government of Telangana. We gave them Adobe Spark and we asked them to create content in regional language. And that was a beautiful content that the teachers came up with. So there are ideas. They know what they have to do. And after all, we know they are the teachers. They are the ones who taught us in our childhood. So I think it's important to build their capacity, give them the right set of tools, the right set of content, so that they are able to nurture and really create future leaders out of the students that we have. Over to other panelists for their thoughts.
Yeah, Kavita ji, you said that what the COVID has taught to us as far as education school is concerned. It is not the deficiency which has been brought about by the COVID. It is a total absence of the infrastructure which is required to face this kind of situation. Though the severity, the longevity, and unexpectedness of this whole COVID is beyond any kind of limits. Yet, if we leave aside the Kendriya Vidyalayas and Navodaya Vidyalayas run by the central government, and if we can look at the state government schools throughout the country, the digital infrastructure which is required to meet this kind of situation, unexpected though it may be, it is totally absent. And this is what it is brought about. Not in the school itself, particularly if we leave aside the cities and town, in the 70% population in the rural villages, the strength of the network signals, it is not more than 2G, or at the most at some sporadic places it may be 3G. And the availability of the smartphones or any kind of other infrastructure, as Rajuji said earlier, where is the teaching side? The other side, even if there is some smartphone at some places, the students can group together and make use of one instrument. Who is on the other side? There is nothing like that in the government system. So as far as the teachers' capability is concerned, we all know that the teachers recruited in the government system, they are highly qualified, much more than they are available in the private sector schools. They are highly paid, not in percentage terms, they are paid in multiplication terms as compared to their counterparts in the public schools. So the physical motivation and the degrees, etc., nothing is lacking. It is the governance issue. The commitment of a government teacher in delivering his knowledge and delivering to the student, that is lacking. So it is a combination of both. The complete absence of the infrastructure digital in the schools and also the internet, as well as the commitment of the teacher himself, which makes the whole thing so clumsy as far as rural and tribal area is concerned. So we have to address it from all the three angles.
Right. And so whose capacity would you be looking at building the most in that situation?
Both the internet, of course, the Prime Minister has declared that he is laying the optic fiber, and within 3 years, every village will be connected with the 4G, etc. We hope that this comes through, because that will revolutionize the whole scenario of the village administration, including the school education. And this what we talk of the digital divide that has come to the fore during this COVID crisis, it will be addressed. But the other facilities in the school for the distant learning, that is completely lacking in the school. In the rural and tribal area, school, secondary or primary, there are not even a computer other than for their own office work. There is nothing called a computer even to education. As somebody said that the mobile digital van going from place to place, etc. There are various models. We in ECHL also do that. We have got 41 vans which go in the remote tribal villages. But this is nothing compared to the enormity of the situation we are facing. So the government has to come forward to equip the schools with the digital infrastructure required from the teaching side. And ultimately, if we have to address the governance issue to inspire and motivate the teachers, they are knowledgeable, they are skilled, they are paid adequately, but not delivering. So how to inspire? There are various models like competition and awarding the teachers, giving them recognition, etc. But there are ways.
Yeah, so I think that that's one question now for Anil and Sharbani. What about the fact that the government has a budget? They go to, every year there's a budgeting exercise. There's a whole issue of infrastructure that has been identified by themselves. There's a lot of money coming in, but then it all sort of seems to go back. And there's somebody here asking a question again about, why isn't that something why is infrastructure something that can't be put in place, given that? Do you have the kind of data saying that this is the kind of budget every school has, or this is what the block has, or district has for the kind of, and would you be looking at, are you duplicating that? Is that already something that's a line item available? And is CSR just sort of unnecessarily kind of putting in their money where it's already available?
I think, Kavita, one that COVID has taught everyone that nobody is mighty as God. Okay, neither the corporate nor the government, right? Even government, for that matter, can do so much, and reach out to a certain set of people. While, like you said, they have budgets every year, they announce huge budgets, but somehow those budgets do not reach the right people, right? You still have schools without roof, without rooms. Okay, but there is a school. I really, when I see the students having food and how they, for them, a lot of such, basic staples is also a luxury, right? So, and this is, I'm talking about, which is about, 100 or maybe 200 kilometers away from Delhi. I'm not talking about dense remotes of, tribal areas. No, it's not that. So it is that in these so-called, semi-rural areas also, the situation is not as good as we think, sitting here. Right? So both government, so there needs to be a sensitization workshops for government officials as well. That whatever you are doing may not be right. Right? It's like, having, somebody donating. So one of these schools where we have midday meal service, I saw that ONGC has given them the sanitary napkin dispenser. So once you fill them, after that, what happens? 40, 50, pads, and they're gone. 60-70% are kept by the school teachers themselves. The rest, for writing purpose, they will give one each to the girls. And what happens to that? That machine is now lying defunct. Similarly, 5 computers donated by somebody. Now there is a bed sheet over that computer. And now they're asking, Anilji, can you please give us, 1 or 2 teachers, for a week or 2 weeks? Now, this is not going to help, right? So people will need to look at this 360-degree program. That whatever you do, that one thing that you do, that has to address that 360-degree paradigm. It cannot be just, I did this and rest somebody else will do this. Right? So if you're doing food, it's not that I will prepare food, now you please pick it up from my kitchen and somebody else will give the food to the children. No. It is then my duty to make sure that it reaches the right audience, they have it, and then the van goes back. This 360-degree paradigm is missing from the entire government notion as well. So that sensitization of government and corporates, unless both comes, including civil society, this is not going to happen. We will be forced to kind of spend that money, but people are spending that money because they have to show that. By saying that, there is a social return on my CSR budget or investment, this is what I have achieved, it's not going to reflect beyond a point. So all this is critical, but that brass tacks is most important for me.
So if I may, yes, if I may add, so I think as is the case with the government, I think the intention is always right. But what happens is that the machinery is so huge and the processes are so complicated that by the time movement happens, it's actually almost always a bit too late. So but what we have in place again, and I'm going to refer to two of our programs, which is the GenPact Social Impact Fellowship Program. And there's another program which is the GenPact Center for Process Transformation. Basically, what we do through these programs is to deploy fellows for a year to work with not-for-profit partners or with the government to figure out, what are the processes that need fixing. Now, with the government, it's always a very long-run process. So the fellows are placed for a longer period of time. What they do is to figure out how the process is working. And there are multiple, handovers. There are multiple processes which are working. One person doesn't talk to the other. So it is a very complicated juggernaut of a machinery that is working, which basically takes away all the time and almost all the energy. What we do for our clients.
On this panel, I'm sure, as well as the audience, which of those have you been able to fix?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. Yes, it is actually work in progress. And as you know, it is a lot of, it has taken us a lot of time. So we are actually working with the Jharkhand government to launch the litigation management system. Now, the litigation management system is a very long run process. And most of the time what happens is our teachers, they apply for leaves that doesn't get approved on time because the approvals haven't gone as per the files have not moved, etc. And then that teacher gets so disgruntled that he or she files a litigation. So there are a whole bunch of pending litigation cases which got piled up and which actually was leading to a lot of dissatisfaction for the teachers who were within the system. We've been working with the Jharkhand government and we've been able to address this litigation management system. And what we've done is we've designed a digital legal management system, which kind of digitizes the case data and case files, and then thereafter reduces the touch points. So the system is implemented now. It has reduced the affidavit filing time by 60%, and it has brought down the funds spent in fines, etc., by 100% almost, and it has saved 7,000 hours of time per year. So, these are some of these. It's a long run process, Kavita. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of courage to go and work with the government and get that buy-in to say that we are here to help you. At times to say that, we will help you see things in a way that probably you are not seeing yourselves because you're too closer to the ground. Then deploy our analytics, digital, re-engineering, business, design thinking, and Lean Six Sigma skill sets to say that this is how we can re-engineer the process. But the best part is that the places where the partnership has worked, the impact has been huge. So my take on it is that tech can only be an enabler. Tech cannot exist on its own. Tech has to be there to improve processes. So as long as we understand our processes the way we should, as long as we know what the end outcome is and have that design thinking concept, and then plug in tech, we will be able to progress in the right manner to see impact happening.
Okay, so one final question to everybody. I think NGOs have done a lot of collaboration. There are some questions that are coming on the chat as well. I think one of them was
can I just make a small statement before you kind of?
Yeah, sure.
So I think I'll pick up from where Sarvani is left. For me as a professional and as working in the work, my job is not to replace the government, neither I can replace the government. I am here to enable. I look myself as a catalyst, as a partner in the catalyst process. And this work is not something that it will end on this particular day and then that is solved. It will always be a constant organic linkage. You develop one and then you develop another, it's an organic program and process that keeps on happening. If you see the NGO movement in the 90s and the 20s, how education how right education became. So it wasn't a one-person effort. There was an entire movement in the country because of which we had the right to education. It's a process that got involved, and there was a whole set of people involved in it.
I understand. I think Rajat, the question.
Sorry, last thing I just want to say.
Yeah.
Just to respond to Bajrangji here.
Yeah, sure.
Just as difference of opinion, or rather, my experience here has been that there are multiple challenges in the entire country, in the tribal belts, in the poorer countries. I've traveled extensively and worked in all of that. I understand, but I will not try to wash the entire government picture in one brush that everybody is demotivated or doesn't want to work. For me, I think we have very good people and we have very bad people also, like they exist in the society. So we need to leverage how we work. So that's my personal take on it.
Absolutely, I get that. But the bigger question, like you've seen NGOs having to work together during COVID, where they looked at it and said, this area, it's sort of really requiring all of us. And they forgot about their individual differences. They forgot about their egos, and they kind of got together and said, let's work together. So do you find that in you, the ability to work across different CSRs with other companies, working together to say, let's sort a particular region or an area's issues out, and to really look at it in terms of capacity building of the government together as a collaborative, to be able to make the kinds of changes that I think Sharbani is talking about in terms of improving on the systems, so that the bigger impact is bigger than just providing something that might not last or sustain. Is that something that's happening?
Kavita, can I ask you a question?
Yes, Garima, definitely.
So you've also been working, I know we have all expressed our thoughts about, our experience, our suggestions, our challenges, our solutions. We'd like to hear from you as well, based on your experience of running your own NGO or your experience in the field of education.
Thanks, that's really nicely disruptive. I mean, thank you for sort of putting me onto the panel as well. I think if we were to look at the kinds of things that you're talking about, for us, it's only about leadership, governance, and systems change. It's really necessary that we look at it like that. We think that, a lot of you have expressed, that the government is extremely wise. The teachers are really fantastic. They're very, very well informed, and everybody has the capacity. Sometimes it's just the lack of enabling, a culture that says that you can take that decision. And sometimes it's really about getting people together as a professional community of stakeholders to say, this is how we can work together. So whether it's CSR working on local schools, but not a CSR sort of doing, one company CSR working on 5 schools, but really CSR in an area or a block, coming together to look at the school's requirements in that whole block. The schools being able to identify their needs through a really strong process that involves the system leaders as well. That's what we have seen really working beautifully. So that's the kind of synergy that I see coming, really being required in the future, where we get together, we forget about whether we are, NGO, CSR, government, but work together and say, how do we, shift whatever is the requirement of the school, so that the children get impacted. And then we are interested in more than just, of course, we are interested in literacy, numeracy, and outcome indicators of that kind, but we're also interested in critical thinking and creativity. And, are they actually able to collaborate, and do they work in pairs and groups, and do they get a sense of how they can solve their problems as children? So I think it's a lot to do with, I'm quite excited about the NEP. I'm very excited about the idea that you can leverage complex leaders, what is known as a complex being a 3-year-old and the journey of a 3-year-old to an 18-year-old. Really being looked at as by somebody in the area who's a higher secondary head. And I'm really hopeful that that's where we're going to go. We're going to go towards collaboration, synergy, and working together as partners with the government. So that's what we've been doing. I don't know, I think we've got only about 2 minutes left, and I would be happy if anybody wants to have the last word. I don't need to.
Thanks, Kavita ji. You brought out this is the point of the synergy. NGOs have been getting together and they are working in tandem, but the CSR funding companies working in tandem or in collaboration with each other for a particular project with the common objective. That is something must be seen, because you raised a question that duplication of the resources utilization by the government and in the same place by the CSR funds as well. Some duplication cannot be avoided, because CSR itself is in a sort of supplementing wherever the public authority has either failed or lagged or it is slack, whatever way. So it is supplementing otherwise the public authority liability or efforts. So some duplication is okay, but I feel that you are right in bringing out this issue of need for collaboration among the CSR funding companies, because there is a lot of duplication. Just now Anilji said that in the same school he is doing something, A part of the infrastructure, ONGC is providing B part, then some other CSR companies providing C part. I mean, this is what is happening. So there has to be some collaboration platform among the CSR funding agencies as well, so that I mean, the resources are utilized in an optimum manner.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we've reached 5:30, and I would just say a big thank you to CSR Box as well as to everybody on the panel. I hope there's somebody from CSR Box who wants to now take over and close the session. Yamini?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Anand, for being a wonderful moderator, and to all our panelists for such an engaging discussion. I think while this session was more about acknowledging the challenges that are there within teacher training and within, you know, the education system, I think the air of opportunity and the air of collaboration that has remained constant through this session has been really, really encouraging to witness. So thank you to all your panelists for coming together today.